Well, these are times where I think it has become necessary for us, each of us and all of us, to do the best we can to not hide our true feelings about things. That is to say, whenever we hide our true feelings or press them down, they have a way of gathering energy down there and then breaking out in unpredictable ways. So just now, it's probably helpful for us to begin to practice speaking truthfully with one another in a spirit of gentleness and kindness. And what I am hoping to do in our services here, even just allowing this little bit of repartee, this little bit of back talk between the reader and the minister, and the congregation and the minister, so that it is not so strictly defined and there's more room for your participation. I have been aware of something for most of my adult life. I began as a lay minister with the United Church of Canada in rural Manitoba. And my basic assessment over all of my years in that kind of work is that rural Canada, or what I could call small town Canada, is in danger of disappearing almost altogether. And I think that you folks will have some sense of what I'm referring to, because Barbara and I at breakfast yesterday were noticing the disparity in the price of gasoline, what it costs you folks to put gas in your car 40 minutes away from Kamloops and what it cost Barbara and I in Kamloops. And we recognize that the small communities all around Kamloops have to pay more for gas, which of course works very well for the economy of Kamloops, but does not work well at all for the economy of places like Logan Lake and others in Canada. Now, I'd like you to know that my analysis, both as a theologian and as somebody who is interested in the modern situation, that systematically rural Canada is being dismantled. That is to say, all those people who can remember when the economy was built on the work of families who were occupied with the fisheries, with the forestries, with farming, with mining, and with industrial production, factories, and such things, that is all being disappeared. It's being taken away. And it's being taken away by government policy, and it's being taken away in response to the pressure of persons in very high places who have power. Now, I'm saying that to you so that I can make a small bridge between your experience as citizens in a small Canadian town and the experience of the people in the days of Jesus. The pattern is almost identical. And what we see in the Gospels is Jesus going about from town to town, from village to village, and there he is finding the people demoralized. Their spirits are broken. It seems to them that there's nothing they can do about what is happening to the land that they love. The land that gave them a good life, but now everything seems to be benefiting only the religious personalities in the city of Jerusalem and the political personalities in the city of Rome. That is to say, both religion and politics had been so corrupted by greed and the hunger for power that the poor people who produced the wealth of the land suffered. So I want to be very clear at the age of 62, I don't want to hedge anymore, neither do I want to offend anybody. But I believe we are in a time like the time that Isaiah is speaking about. Isaiah is speaking to a city, Jerusalem, which was founded on the hope that God would rule in the earth and peace would be distributed and all people would live in health and well-being. And instead, Jerusalem was captive to the Babylonian system of economics and politics, and Jerusalem languished. In the same way that a young mom might languish as her husband goes off to war somewhere. Things just weren't right. And Isaiah says, don't worry, things are going to be right. And what I'd like to do is leave with you at least one thought. That if we take seriously the scriptures that we have been studying for most of our lifetime, some of us, and if we begin to ask what they mean for our experience, that we take hope from Isaiah. There's a change starting to happen. That's what Isaiah says to the people of his day, and that's what I say to you. And that change means that you don't just have to be passive anymore and take it. I learned too much how costly it can be when you're a free-thinking person who says no to authority. See, I've been imprisoned in Canada for saying no to the government's policy about how they treat poor people. I've been locked up and humiliated in a prison where nobody could see anything that was going on. I was treated as a criminal while the premier of your province was robbing the people. That same premier who ended up going with his lady friend to Hawaii and getting drunk and putting all kinds of people at risk. He never had to even blink about it. He's still a hero for people. The Prime Minister in Ottawa gave him a cushy job over there overseas. He was a scoundrel, as are many politicians in this country. They are scoundrels. And that's exactly the kind of things that Jesus was saying when he was going around to all those little villages. The priests in Jerusalem are scoundrels. They're stealing your flax, they're stealing your barley, they're stealing your chickens, they're stealing your pigs, because you have to pay money so God will be happy with you. Jesus said, that's a bunch of hooey. You don't need to go to no temple for God to be happy with you. You just got to know deep inside, and the only way you can know that is by trusting that it's true. God loves you where you are. And that brings me to the text in Corinthians. Because in Corinthians, Jesus is talking to people who are disillusioned and disheartened, and he's saying, folks, start working together. Start cooperating. Start being partners in how you can do something about the way that you're being treated by the powers in high places. Each one of you has got something to bring to the equation. Each one of you has an insight. Each one of you has a talent or a passion. Each one of you has an administrative gift or an organizational gift. Don't use those gifts to keep the building intact. Use those gifts to make a difference in your neighborhood and in your community. How many small congregations in Canada aren't filled with people just, did I say filled? Nearly empty with people just like you, really doing your very, very best to maintain what you've been left. But what I'd like you to consider is the difference between the material things you've been left and the spiritual things you've been left. I don't want you to abandon the hope that was in your grandparents and great-grandparents. I want that hope to be strong in you. But it should be a hope for things like peace and justice and truth. Not a hope that we can keep the lights on and keep the furnace going. You see? I'm going to start encouraging people all over Canada to walk away from these small buildings and start becoming small circles of friends. And of course, if somebody's got a fiddle or a banjo or an accordion, or if somebody knows how to hum well, sing when you get together. Tell stories when you get together. And I'm saying this to you because I believe that's what Jesus said to the folks in Galilee. You don't got to go to that temple anymore, which is taxing you to death. You don't need to support that government anymore, which is taxing you to death. You live your life, and if they come and get you, take it as well as you can. So I want to encourage you to be a happy people, a community of people working together for the good of this place. And that brings me to the last text in John. There's nobody can ever say Jesus was a deadbeat. Nobody can ever say Jesus went around putting hard things on people's backs, like building buildings and keeping them going. What Jesus did, he come to a community, whatever they were doing. If there was a wedding, he was the life of the party. And that's the story here. Jesus is the life of this party. They're talking about it that day. They're talking about it for months, and we're still talking about it. That's how good he was. And I love this text because I'm a very critical reader. I was taught in the Dutch Calvinist tradition, and I was just supposed to accept everything that I was told by the seminary. Well, I'm not that kind of a person. I like to dig around for myself. And I love that in this story there's a little bracket. Some of the Bibles put it as a little bracket. But it says, but the servants knew. And that's like if you have a Hebrew sensibility, there's a wink there. There's something going on that some people know, but not everybody knows. And here's my theory. You can take it or leave it. But Jesus, you know, hung around with some pretty unsavory characters. He was accused of hanging around with prostitutes and thieves. He was accused of hanging around with unclean people. All the wrong folks. I'm thinking there's somebody who knew Jesus, who really liked Jesus, And if you want to put it in a modern world, you could sort of say he was sort of a member of a gang. And what this gang used to like to do is when there'd be a camel train coming from Ethiopia with wine, especially for Herod's table, finest wine in the land, these thieves used to like to stop the camel train and say, look, give us your wine or we're going to take your life. And they took that wine and they hid it in this hillside. You see, because he had a plan. And the plan was that they were going to sort of say to the people, look, folks, there's lots of ways of getting things done. Not just the way they say in church and not just the way they say in the government. If people cooperate, remarkable things can happen. Now, I don't want you to accept my story about what might have happened that day. But I do want you to expect that if you take seriously the religion of your mothers and your fathers and your grandmothers and your grandfathers and forget a little bit about all the trappings, you will discover that Jesus is the author of joy for you. And what I want you to know, that we're talking here about sharing the peace later and the concern about being contagious. Well, I want you to know that joy is a contagious thing. And if you can get it, you can spread it to everybody you meet. So I want you to work at that. And I want you to work at it by being encouraged. Again, by Isaiah. God is with you. You are not alone. You are not forsaken. It's the powers who abuse you that are forsaken. And I trust that this will inspire you to do something creative, something new, something wonderful, and something fun. I better stop. I'll say Amen.